The opinions and viewpoints expressed in .NET Rocks are not necessarily those of its sponsors, or of Microsoft Corporation, its partners, or employees. .NET Rocks is a production of Franklin's Net, which is solely responsible for its content. Franklin's Net, training developers to work smarter. Rockheads, watch out for that fourth turn and listen up. It's time for another stellar episode of .NET Rocks, the internet audio talk show for .NET developers with Carl Franklin and Richard Campbell. This is Jeff Maciolik, here to announce show number 109 with guest Matt Mannion, recorded live Friday, April 15th, 2005. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net, training developers to work smarter, and now offering hands-on VBNet and ASP.NET classes remotely. Online at www.franklins.net. And by Data Dynamics, makers of ActiveReports.net. Simple, powerful, and cost-effective reporting for Windows Forms and ASP.NET web applications. Online at www.datadynamics.com. Support is also provided by Code Magazine, the leading independent magazine for .NET developers, online at www.code-magazine.com. And now, the man who just can't bring himself to write another freaking racing joke, Carl Franklin.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Hope you're having a good week or a good start of your week. My name's Carl Franklin. You're listening to .NET Rocks, the internet audio talk show for .NET developers. And as always, I'm here in New London, Connecticut on a beautiful spring day. Not as always. It's not always spring here, and mind you, it's most of the time it's miserable. But anyway, I am here in New London, and my co-host, my partner in crime out there in Vancouver, British Columbia, is Richard Campbell. Hi, Richard.
Hey, man. How you doing?
I'm doing all right.
You know, ever since I got those death threat emails, I've stopped talking about the weather around here, but maybe they'd be happy to know it's pouring rain here right now.
That does actually warm my heart.
I thought it might.
And we're it's the reverse now. We're getting the beautiful sunny days, and you're getting the rain. Good.
That's right. Well, it's the time of year. You like and, you know, I'm actually going to see our friend Tim Huckabee tomorrow.
Oh, yeah?
He was up skiing for the week in Whistler with his family, and he's got an extra day left, so we were going to pop down and spend the day together.
And then he's going to spend the weekend in detox, or
well,
dumb. All right, never mind. Moving right along.
And speaking of other RDs, our mutual friend Kate Gregory is coming out to visit me soon.
No kidding.
Yeah, she's doing a tour for Microsoft Canada on smart clients, and so she'll be out here for a few days, and I'm going to get a chance to see her. If anybody in Canada is up to catching this, they're doing it in a lot of different cities. It's at msdn.microsoft.ca/smartclient.
What else is happening in Canada, MSDN-wise, these days?
Well, the other big thing going on right now is, we mentioned last week, was the Last Developer Show.
Yeah.
So this is a contest that developers in Canada only, I'm afraid, except Quebec, I'm sorry, there's lots of rules around this, can win $25,000 for answering a whole bunch of questions about .NET right.
Nice.
Yeah, and lots of people signing up. The contest officially starts May 2nd, so there's still time to get started. And there are prizes every other week, so there'll be lots of Xboxes and other goodies given away as well.
And you have a URL one more time?
That URL is www.lastdeveloper.com.
Beautiful. Well, as you know, I have been writing code this week, having a great old time with my friend Dax, my graphics counterpart to my coding brain in India. And the two of us actually make one complete developer. It's kind of interesting how that works. But
that form is absolutely amazing. The crumpled look is the only thing I can describe it as.
Yeah, well, we're not going to show people yet, but just say that, you know, old Carl is working on some really stellar stuff that we hope is going to change the face of podcasting forever.
Well, nothing less.
That said, we'll just move right along with the mail. Got 2 letters of note this week, and I know that you've been enjoying the fan mail.
I certainly have.
Yep. So this one is from Scott Duro, and he's in the UK, and he says, "Hi, Carl. I've just been catching up with the shows I've missed whilst being busy earning a living. I especially enjoyed Scott's rants on CSS. CSS Zen Garden truly is the nirvana of web design. I couldn't agree more."
Yeah, me too.
"I would just like to enlighten you to the fact that there is an excellent Mozilla Firefox plugin that allows in-place CSS editing without the need for continuous refreshing of the page, and it also allows examination of the CSS style being applied to any selected element. Very cool."
Very cool.
And I have shrinksterized that URL. If you go to shrinkster.com/4R3, you'll see that. Keep up the good work, and I look forward to the next episode of .NET Rocks. Cheers, Scott Duro, lead architect, Cyber, that's CIBER, UK. Thanks, that's great. And, Scott, we're going to send you a .NET Rocks with the newly designed Carl and Richard logo. I swear, I'm just going to make a new logo that just says .NET Rocks with no pictures and no times and anything. We've changed the swag picture like 90 times on this show. So the people who have the original Mark Dunn cups, those are going to be worth a lot of money someday, right?
Someday. Well, we each last for 50 shows. So, if you make up a logo this time, it's good for at least a year.
That's right. This one comes from Terry Thibodeau. "Hi, Carl and Richard. Love the show. It really keeps me updated with a constant stream of great new productivity utilities and great coding tips and practices. I just wanted to add a comment about the ISO utility that Ken Getz mentioned in show 105. I use images for everything. I hate relying on physical media because I can never find the damn disk when I need it.
I hear that.
Yeah, so when I set off in search of a good image tool, I tried many, but found Ultra ISO to be the best so far. That's ultraiso.com. I did originally look at Magic ISO, but feel Ultra ISO has more features, a better interface, and more updates. A perfect companion to Ultra ISO is Daemon Tools. That's at shrinkster.com/4R4. And the AWXD Tools shell extension at shrinkster.com/4R6. It lets you create up to 4 drives in Windows on which you can mount ISO images to run as actual drives. I can't live without it. See, you just listen to DNR, you pick up a couple of new tools, and how cool is that? Anyway, keep doing what you're doing, and thanks for making programming fun again. You're welcome. I take full responsibility for making programming fun. Thank you very much. Terry Thibodeau, programmer analyst, Fraser Milner, Casgrain LLP, Calgary, Alberta.
I'm a fellow Canadian.
You will also get some swag of your choice, Terry. That's all I got for email.
Well, we got some other emails, but they're going to be Monday's emails.
Yes. There are just some that we just, frankly, won't read on .NET Rocks.
That's all there is to it.
Well, this is a very exciting show for me, Richard. The first time I heard about this project, this Indianapolis 500 racing project, was at Dev Days 2004. And they actually did a video on this and showed the video at Dev Days. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. And then I realized that it was done by one of our own regional directors' companies, John Rauschenberger's company, Clarity Consulting. And in the back of my mind, I said to myself, this has got to be a .NET Rocks show. And of course, like all good ideas, it immediately vaporized from my consciousness. And then we were, trying to think of some good guests. We were reviewing all of the possibilities for guests and trying to figure out the schedule late this winter, early spring. And that came up. So we got in touch with the right people, and here we go. So Matt Mannion is going to be on. He's an engagement manager for Clarity Consulting Incorporated, and this is a Chicago-based technology consulting firm and Microsoft Gold certified partner. Matt has delivered multiple large-scale WinForms and WebForms systems for a variety of industries, including retail, financial services, publishing, and banking. Contact Matt at mmannion, That's MMANNION at claritycon.com. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
How are you?
Great.
This is quite an impressive case study that Microsoft has done on this project. Generated quite a lot of press, has it not?
Yeah, it has. We've had the case study they did, case study you're referring to, and the video. I was actually in that video that you referred to in the opening as well.
Awesome.
We shot that down in Phoenix last year at one of the practice runs.
So let's introduce this whole thing. What is it all about?
Well, the IRL, or Indy Racing League, they had an application in place that they provided for the teams in the pits, the pit crews, the media, as well as manufacturers and the race officials themselves. It was a Java Flash application that they wrote quite a while ago, and it worked okay for them, but it didn't give the users all of the flexibility and functionality that they were looking for.
Okay.
I.e., it was not customizable. The view you got of the race results was what you had to stick with. Change columns or highlight particular cars or racers or hone in on different metrics within the application, and it wasn't scaling well as they needed more to put more users up on it. It just wasn't scaling well.
And you guys came in, and the rest is history. No, so what did you guys do for them?
Well, they brought us in to build actually a new application to provide results to the teams and the media. So our job was to come in and build an application that would give them the additional functionality and scalability that they were looking for.
Oh, great. Now, when you say it was a Flash Java application, do you mean Java on the back end and Flash on the front end with some sort of Flash, the Flash language, the action script or whatever?
Correct. Yeah, the presentation layer was done in Flash, and it was the developer who did it actually was a Flash developer, so he just kind of migrated to that tool to build this application. It really wasn't a very good fit.
Okay. That
type of application wasn't a good fit for Flash. It was very tedious to build and very, very time-consuming and costly to maintain and to modify. So as a result, they just never modified it. They weren't able to make changes and provide the functionality to the users that they needed.
When you say it was tedious to build, it's kind of like a contradiction in terms, because the whole reason you would use Flash is the ease of use in which you can create something working that looks pretty good in a very small package very quickly. And so it's interesting to hear you say that it was sort of tedious. Richard, have you ever used Flash?
No, I'm not a big Flash developer. I certainly worked in projects around those things. But, I can imagine why you'd say it was tedious. Flash is good at some things, it's not good at others. When you talk about like meticulously detailed forms, those kinds of things, I don't see Flash as a great tool for that. It's great for creating something a little more amorphous.
Yeah.
But, the feature set's got to be pretty simple to really make Flash make sense.
Yeah, what were some of the brick walls that you ran up against, UI-wise? Or that they ran up against?
Well, the main results viewer is a data grid, and it presents one row in the grid per car that's on the track. And then there's, like I said before, 30 or 40 different metrics or measurements that this system is taking as the car goes around the track, like lap speed, average lap speed, last lap speed, all that stuff. And so they had to build this matrix, this grid, in Flash. And as you pointed out, it's that type of application just doesn't play well with Flash. So
yeah.
I actually got to look at some of the code that this guy had to sling to make this work, and it just wasn't pretty.
Yeah.
Well, you think about all the stuff that's actually in a grid, just the grid lines alone, every bit of that has to be coded in Flash.
And just back us up a little bit and tell us what exactly the kinds of things this program does. Is this like this is for taking measurements and displaying those things to the pit crew and the user, basically keeping everybody informed with the stats that what's going on in the race? Is that
Correct.
What it's all about?
Yeah, the way it works is the track is actually outfitted with 5 or 6 pickup points around the track.
Uh-huh.
Each track that the IRL runs a race on has been outfitted with these data sensors around the track.
Okay.
And each car has mounted underneath it at a specified point from the nose. Has to be the exact same distance for each car. It's like 33 inches from nose. You have to mount this transponder underneath the car.
Huh.
And then as the car goes around the track and the transponder goes over these pickups that are channeled in the track, it sends information back to a central computer that is capturing that information. And it knows the time it takes to get from one pickup point to the next. It can calculate the speed.
So it calculates speed, velocity, and all that other kind of stuff.
Correct. And so through the course of an average race, this system is collecting 80 to 100,000 data points.
Wow.
It's a lot of data.
And how many cars race in one race?
There's around between 30 and 35 on the track at any given time.
Okay.
Yeah, I started to say that all that data then gets sent back to a SQL Server 2000 database, and then from there it was our job to present that data to the users in a way that could be useful and helpful for them. And everybody's looking at it from a different perspective. The race teams are looking at how fast the car is running, maybe at a certain section, certain turns. They're looking at lap speeds, average lap speed, things like that. The manufacturers are looking at something different, and then the media and the race officials are all looking at something different. So the application needed to be highly customizable so everybody could look at or hone in on different pieces of data that they want to see at any given time.
That's sweet.
So you've got this one source of all this information. You got to be able to put it out in lots of different ways.
Correct.
I just want to give everybody the URL to the case study that Microsoft did on the Indy Racing League project. It's at shrinkster.com/4R2. That's 4R2. And in that, you can get a really good sense of what the application is and what it does. That if you're not getting it from this interview, but there's a lot more information up there in terms of the reasons that they chose .NET. Tell me about one thing I thought was really interesting reading this case study is the constraints that you guys were under to provide this application. Tell me how that came to be that all of a sudden you had X amount of weeks and it absolutely had to be done quickly. And tell me about that.
Yeah, it was kind of painful, and I don't know all the circumstances that led up to the shortened time frame. But by the time we were brought in by the IRL to help them build this, it was December. Actually, I think it was maybe late November, and they needed it by January because they knew that their first race or their first practice run was going to be in Florida in January.
Ouch.
Okay.
Essentially had a 5-week window and a very tight and limited budget to deliver this application. So it was pretty hectic, but that was a big part of why they brought us in and why we chose the .NET platform to help us get that done.
And so they were basically just like, help, and you guys decided that you would use .NET. You obviously had been using it before and having some success. What was your particular role in the project?
My role was engagement manager, and actually I turned out to be the lead developer as well because there was myself, a partner from Clarity, and then we had one developer from the IRL working on it. So it was really 3 or really 2.5 resources on the project for the 5-week period.
3 people in 5 weeks to build the whole thing.
And what were the different pieces that were involved?
Well, the main application is obviously the results viewer. That's what everybody's using and looking at. But on top of that, then we also had an operator console, which is what they use to set up each race, all the practice sessions.
Okay.
A race really consists of like a 3 or 4 day event, and there's usually 2 practice sessions, a qualifying session, and then the race, which is the end of the last part of the event.
Right.
So the operator console allows them to define the race, all the practice sessions are going to have, the start and stop time of each session, and all that's visible on the viewer. So we had the operator console, the results viewer, and then we also provided a way to look at historical results that they could take home with them at the end of the race.
Huh.
So there's a viewer for that as well.
Cool.
So they can actually dump some data and be disconnected from the central server and still view their race data.
Absolutely, yeah, because the data grid that we used to show the results was actually driven by a strongly typed data set that we just bound to that data grid.
Okay, now this is interesting.
We gave them the option to just persist that data set to an XML data set on their local hard drive. And then when they leave, they can go home and they can analyze those race results at their leisure, disconnected. And over time, we would build up. So at the end of the year, there's 12 or 14 or 16 races. It'll have a data set for each one, and they can actually compare performances from race to race.
That's interesting.
That's excellent.
Now, the operator console, is this a Windows application or a web app or what?
That's a WinForm app as well. It's got one user basically. It's the folks in the timing and scoring booth.
And were you guys writing directly to with ADO.net, just a SQL Server over TCP/IP, or were you using web services, or what's the transport look like?
We didn't use a web service. We just basically were using ADO.net, talking to the database.
Okay. And how much was that SQL Server working? What kind of performance? How did it perform?
The SQL Server performed outstanding. It was powered on a pretty nice size server.
Okay.
But it's pretty taxing because while the one application is shooting in these 80 to 100,000 rows, we've got anywhere from 40 or 50 plus users hitting this thing with about a half-second refresh rate to get the latest results back. So the results on the screen are never more than a half-second old.
Wow.
So the timing was actually pretty quick from the track, the transponder to the SQL Server, and then back up to the viewer.
I was just thinking, you must have another glob of code sitting there monitoring the transponder, and as data's coming in, writing it to the database. And then it's just you're just straight polling against the database to see the data as it comes in.
Right. So those are two disconnected processes. And there's one application that was running, just collecting data off the track and shooting it into the SQL Server. And then there was our application sitting on top of the SQL Server, just pulling the data off every half second for each client.
So the main thing you guys worked on was the presentation side of this. The feed stuff worked?
Correct. The infrastructure for the data feed off the track and the transponders was already in place.
That's nice.
I like this quote from John Koski. It says, initially, Koski was concerned that the increased volume of data aggregation, could be an issue in the server's performance. Quote, in a typical race, we'll feed 80,000 to 100,000 records into the database. In addition to a lot of outgoing information, we're serving up 300 to 600 simultaneous connections per second, he says. We were a little worried about how SQL Server would handle that volume, but as it turns out, we were running at less than 20% of processing power. That's awesome.
Yeah, and we tested that back in Indianapolis when we were building the application. What I did was I used Application Center Test Act, and basically just put up a web page that was just calling into that results viewer method and stored proc.
Yeah.
And I just loaded up several hundred clients just hammering away at that thing, and then I put performance monitors up on the SQL Server box.
Yeah. And
tune the query that way, and just let it fly. And we knew before we even got out to the track, we knew that thing was going to perform real well.
It was going to handle a lot more data than you could probably throw at it.
You know, one thing that I remember from the video is that you guys were using tablet PCs. Is that right, with a wireless network?
We were using the wireless network. That's how we get the data to the tracks. Every time they go down to each venue, they have to set up this wireless network. And each crew actually puts up their own computer, what they want to view the results on. So it isn't necessarily a tablet PC.
Okay. But I think I remember somebody had a tablet, right?
May have been, yeah.
Yeah. I just thought that was very cool, perfect application for a tablet, the guy in the pit, looking at the information and the car at the same time, so he can diagnose what's going on, around lap 4, so there was a slowdown or something like this. And
this is a smart client app, right? This is not a web-based app.
It's not web-based. It's Windows Form application, and it was a smart client application because they really wanted the ability to push updates out to the teams without having to disrupt them or, visit each team and station and install an update.
Yeah, I guess all these teams are independent entities, and they've got their own gear, and you need to work with what they've got.
Correct. So we publish minimum standards that they need to have in order to run the application. And then after that, they show up with whatever they want. And as you point out, it could be a tablet PC, it could be a desktop, whatever. And then there's so many different players they're dealing with because beyond the crew, then they have the media are all looking at this. So they're running it. The manufacturers come in and they want to see how their tires and motors and what have you are performing out on the track. So they come in and they want to look at results. So they're looking at it. So a lot of times you don't even know who's coming in, on any given race. So it's very difficult to coordinate those updates.
All this different bits of data about specs on the car, state of the tires, all those kinds of things are coming regularly via these sensors on the track.
Right. Well, the performance of the cars coming through the track, and then they can interpret what that means.
Yeah, I was going to say some of the data gets inferred from just the raw data and the ratios.
Yeah, because I know I've read lots about race cars having telemetry systems, but I wasn't sure that the track data was part of that same telemetry, or if they're separate things.
A lot of times it's separate. The car owners themselves will, might put monitoring systems and sensors in their cars themselves.
Right.
They're only privy to that.
Yeah, so then they have detailed data of their car, but when it comes to official track performance figures, the track's in control of that.
Correct. These are the official results. The results that come out of the system are the official results published by the IRL.
And everybody's using wireless for it.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how well the wireless network holds up under all those machines and all those connections.
You know what? When we were out at Phoenix, surprisingly, there was one little glitch at one end of the track that just on the way down. You know how the pit crew runs all the way down the straightaway there.
Yeah.
Folks on the far ends were having a difficulty, but they actually were able to remedy that. And for the most part, it runs real well.
Wow. So, I mean, a bunch of access points or just one really powerful antenna?
They actually had one other relay point at the race I was at.
I got a really interesting question for you. I don't know if you can specifically address this yourself, but do you remember what were some of the specific problems they were having with the Flash Java version, and that were solved, or non-issues in the .NET version that you wrote?
Well, the biggest thing, there were issues on both ends of it. There were issues from the developer perspective that we already talked about, just the difficulty in maintaining it. And given the way the race season runs most of the year, they have very little time to be back in the office and modifying their applications before they need to be back out on the road and doing a race every month.
Yeah.
So they really don't have a big window on which to do these application changes.
I also read in the case study that there are some problems with the different versions of the JRE caching on the client or on the server or something. There were some issues with versioning that couldn't be solved.
Yeah, they ran into some issues with that, and they had like a middle tier that actually sat between their SQL Server and the Flash application, and they had issues with that as well. So the other problems they had were just they couldn't customize this. So there's, like I said, there's like 40 or 50 data points that you can look at, and with the Flash application, you had to look at all of them.
You know, Richard, as I'm listening to this, reading the case study and listening to the story, I get the distinct feeling that this is like the perfect application to write. You know, it's not mired in lots of complex business objects and lots of rules and extremely large, complex architectures. It's a simple, data set centric ADO.NET app.
Yeah, but it's velocity sensitive. I mean, the timeliness of the data is critical.
Oh, sure. I'm not.
And it's got to be very customizable. There's more data than you can possibly reasonably look at. So you need to be able to sort it in the form you need to see it as.
But I guess what I'm saying is that it's almost like it seems like it's made for that model. Like the whole .NET dataset centric programming model really just is like a no-brainer in this situation.
Well, and the kicker is the offline stuff.
Oh yeah, totally. That's great. It's a kind of application that I wish I could get to write once in a while. That's
it's a real fun application to write because as you're building this, we had a simulator there in the office that would run with a videotape of historical races, and as the video is running, then in the background we can simulate the data coming through for those cars.
Yeah.
So it was just fun to do. The only thing was just the time frames with which we had to do it.
Right.
But other than that, you're right. It was just a classic, WinForm app, data set, bind to a grid. The thing that made it difficult was all the functionality they wanted in the grid.
Yeah.
In 5 weeks.
And you used just the standard grid? Did you modify the? We
actually went with it was an Infragistics data grid.
Oh, okay.
Ultra WinGrid or whatever.
How did you like that?
It's not the most discoverable programming interface in the world, but it had a lot of the functionality and flexibility that we wanted.
Okay.
They wanted to be able to customize everything.
A little bit of a learning curve, though. I imagine you have a learning curve with any kind of grid.
With anything, yeah. But the grid actually worked out real well, and users are able to pick and choose the columns they want to see, what color they want. If they want to highlight them, they can choose a font, different font for every column if they want. when the race is actually running and there's dynamic data in there, they can pick a row, certain rows that they want to highlight, and change the color, the background color, the font on those rows. So if they want to highlight their car, for example, and maybe their next closest one or two competitors, they can kind of signal them out and keep an eye on them and let everybody else just kind of fall to the background so they can just focus on what they want to.
Here's a good question from the chat room. How did you handle two cars crossing the same sensor at the same time? Or did the cars have identifiers in them?
Oh, yeah. The cars all have an identifier in them. And because we used to joke about, have you ever switched them up? Because those all get pre-assigned ahead of time.
Got it.
You have to mount the right transponder in the right car.
Yeah, that would be bad.
That's critical. Very critical, yes.
So you don't actually – so the sensors will handle data in series then? You're not going to have parallel data coming in through that?
Right.
Okay. That's the answer that he was looking for. Cool.
Now, there's a mention also here on the website or on the case study about SharePoint.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was a whole other piece of the application within the 5-week window.
Oh, great.
Oh, man.
Yeah, they wanted a way to share documents and information with the race teams and the sponsors and what have you, and they had a website up that was a custom-built website. But again, it was difficult for them to maintain, get content to. They have a very skeletal IT staff. I mean, at any given time, they have no more than 3 people. And that includes John, who is the director.
Right.
So they just don't have a lot of time to do this stuff. And so in parallel to the application that we were building, we also worked on implementing the SharePoint portal server. And that was a huge success. They love the product.
So it was October to January you had to work on it. 3 developers, essentially, right?
Correct.
And 2 of your guys and 1 of theirs. And how much time was spent in testing?
Boy. Yeah, we compressed that down quite a bit. But as I said, we had all the race simulators, so that went real well. So we did that testing, and then I did all of the, the stress testing with the App Center test tool. Probably in a week time frame.
Wow. Did you actually get a chance to test it on live cars before a race?
No.
Oh, my God.
Before a race, yes, we did. Because in January they have their these warm-up races. They're not really races; they're just events where cars can, people can come out and teams can come out and try the cars out and try the track out.
Make sure nothing's going to blow up.
We had two runs of that. One in Miami and one in Phoenix. The Phoenix one is where they shot that video that you saw.
Okay.
If I'm doing the dates right here, you've now had another off season to work on the app.
That's correct.
So what changed?
I can't answer that. I personally haven't done anything on the app since we delivered it.
Oh, right, of course. So you were done, and you've handed it off now to the customer, which is IRL, and they've probably worked on it from there.
And then from there, we'd have to ask John. I don't know what modifications he's made to it in the off season.
And you're talking about John Koski, right?
John Koski, yes.
Was John Rauschenberger involved at all?
John was one of the contacts that got us introduced, got the IRL introduced to us through Microsoft.
Okay.
But actually, the players from Clarity on the project were myself and a partner from Clarity, Darren Whitty.
Okay.
And he helped do some of the development on a part-time basis, and with myself, the developer from the IRL. And then actually, John Koski did a fair amount of the portal work, or SharePoint portal server work.
So you guys literally got this up with a week to test. And that first race, were there any glitches? Was there anything that you needed to fix and get a new build out, and did that work? I mean, how did you handle updates?
There were actually no issues with it.
Wow.
Put it out, and they went down to Miami. We weren't there, and John sent us an email back saying that everything – there was one issue. I take that back. There was an issue with user permissions, I think.
Oh, okay.
Something about had something configured. Some of the people couldn't get in, and he was able to fix that.
That's always an issue, isn't it?
Yeah. Once you get into the live production environment, there's always
it's all transitioning hardware. You go to a new set of gear, you always bang into permission issues and things like that.
Yeah,
right. But yeah, actually, it ran pretty well right out of the box.
Sweet.
I know we had one issue in Phoenix. One of the guys from the IRL had made a change, and then when we got to Phoenix, it wasn't working right. I happened to be there to do the video. Darren and I were there. And we helped them troubleshoot it, and we popped out another version right there.
folks, do yourself a favor and check out our friends' Data Dynamics website, datadynamics.com, makers of ActiveReports.net. Simple, powerful, and cost-effective reporting for Windows Forms and ASP.NET. Very nice stuff. You compile the reports right into your application, ship them with your assemblies. Has all the great features you come to expect in a reporting engine. And you can use ActiveX controls right in the reports too. So great stuff. Data Dynamics has been an excellent sponsor of .NET Rocks for a long time. They deserve a little bit of your love and attention. So go check them out at www.datadynamics.com. So this is obviously a huge win for the VB.NET community. You know, how that you obviously had a choice of language to use. I mean, was it a matter of that the developers that were working on it, that's what they knew, and therefore you chose VB.NET? Or
I think VB.NET was the natural choice because the IRL part of the Flash Java implementation was that middle tier that I briefly mentioned was written in VB6.
Okay.
And so these guys and the website was done in VB6 and ASP.
Right.
So, they're kind of used to the VB and the scripting language and that kind of thing. So VB.NET just seemed like the natural choice for them.
So did you guys train them before you started developing?
We didn't really have time, but that was part of our mission actually, was to not only deliver this application, but also to bring in, the application or development structure for them, a framework, so to speak. So,
right.
We developed, data access classes actually built on the application block, data access application block.
Oh, cool.
Implemented a strategy for exception handling, security, that kind of thing. Just all the basic things in a framework that you need to build on, naming standards, things like that. So we brought all that and laid all that down, showed them how that worked and what that was, and then we started building the application on top of that. So in addition to getting the results viewer app, they also got this development environment and platform with which to build other applications for the IRL.
And it strikes me that you've really focused on what their main stumbling block was making it easy to maintain. They don't get a lot of time to make changes. They can't take a lot of chances, and there's lots of varied demands on them, so they got to be able to keep building this app up.
Right, and it's a very competitive environment out there. I mean, racing in America has become popular, but there's competing entities out there.
Right.
They want to be able to provide their users and customers the best possible product that they can. And they just couldn't respond to those needs in a way like they can now with the system we built on the .NET platform.
And the end result is you saved them quite a bit of money, didn't you?
I think so. I think we definitely came in on time, under budget, and give an application that doesn't cost as much to maintain and or to modify.
Yeah. How did you deal with new builds, versioning?
We actually left them with, because we only did one build, other than the one we did in Phoenix. So we did an initial build, and then we trained them on how to, it was all kept in source safe, so they would do a new build, and then we trained them on how to use the application updater component.
Oh, cool.
It's what we use to implement the smart client component of the application.
So I've heard two patterns and practices group application blocks in this application. You guys are obviously big on that stuff.
Right. We use the data access. It's a modified version of it, but we kind of started there, and actually we watered it down for them a little bit because they don't need all the functionality in there. But that component, once it's in, they should never have to change that. That's something they can use to develop every application they do now.
Speaking of that, have you seen the Enterprise Library, the new sort of all-encompassing set of application blocks from the PAG group?
Yeah, I've taken a look at it, but I haven't really had a chance to play with it.
It sounds like if you had that would have just been a no-brainer.
Right.
Sweet. Wow, man. I'm sort of running out of questions. It's just too easy, man.
This stuff works too well.
That's right.
So you put it together and it worked. Okay, well, where do we go with that?
It really was a success story. I mean, so it was a fun application to work on, and using .NET, and we needed to build strongly typed data sets. We used the drag and drop wizard to do that. we wanted to persist historical results to, the hard disk, and we used just the built-in facility with a data set, right? You can write it out to XML and read it back in. Really, as a productivity tool, this was just a perfect fit.
Here's something that we've been talking about a lot on .NET Rocks, which is, sort of data sets versus business objects, and, which kinds of projects are conducive to each. And I'm wondering, one of the things that Rocky Lotka talks about all the time with the problems with data sets is that, programmers can just reach in there and make changes without any sort of validation code taking over. There's minimal validation of constraints, and even that is kind of hard to control. And then there's really no way to put logic in there unless you use typed data sets, and then if you have to regenerate them, your code goes away, blah, blah, blah. So did you guys – was that – obviously it worked, but were there any issues with data sets that you wish you had a little more control over programming-wise?
I guess I agree with those statements in general, but for this application, other than – because the bulk of this application was pulling data back and presenting it. Yeah. So, for the operator console, we're doing updates, but, for the most part, this really was the data set worked real well in this application. So
presentation layer objects, that type data sets just totally rock.
Totally.
Because you're just reading the data. There is no updating, so there's no validation. So there you go.
Right.
It would occur to me that all the data you're getting in is straight inserts as well. You're never changing data except in the configuration side. Right. With all those velocity tables, that 100,000 rows over the course of a race, it's just straight inserts as fast as you can get them in.
So if nobody's going to create a data set just to do an insert, and then so you're obviously writing store procedures and calling them directly, which is great.
How much involvement did Clarity have on the SharePoint side of this?
We had actually Darren. That was Darren's did most of that. I actually didn't do too much in the SharePoint, and I would say a fair amount.
Yeah, it looks like you really shifted away a lot of the work that they're doing internally. I guess the key of IRL is their communication path to the teams, and that's I guess what the role of this website is that getting those teams have access to what's going on inside of the league all of the time.
Exactly, and they were able to provide information to those teams that they just couldn't do on their custom website. So Darren went in and helped them, set it up, get the framework in place, and then between Darren and John, they pretty much handled John Koski. They pretty much handled the whole SharePoint side.
So they've been humming along for an entire year with this application, and as you said, you have not had to go back and help them consulting-wise with any issues, or?
That's correct. Yeah, I think I don't know if they wanted some updates done throughout the year or not. John and Darren were in contact for that, but I don't think Clarity has done any additional work on it, and I know I haven't personally.
That's really sort of a success story on your side, if not particularly profitable. The app just works, and you've basically created a .NET development team inside of the IRL now.
That's great.
Right, and that was the other deliverable that doesn't get talked about, right? Because everybody can see the app and the case study is done on the app, but in reality, these guys now are empowered. We've empowered them to build other applications and to maintain and extend this one, and to respond to requests and updates from their users.
I sit in a similar seat as you do as a consultant, where we're usually dealing with these concepts of return on investment, and they don't talk about the fact that retreading developers, that getting them up to speed on these new tools has such a significant advantage for the company in the long term, not just the project we're working on right now.
Right. And when we leave, they now have the knowledge to help themselves, and that's a big part of it, and that's what we get out of it too. It's the application, but it's also knowing that we're helping these folks out, so that they can do some things in the future on their own.
You set the bar so high. Oh, and by the way, you can build a mission-critical app in 5 weeks flat.
Yeah, and that was drop dead. That first race was coming, and they needed this application there, and we delivered.
They'll use the old app if this one isn't completely ready.
Yeah, I don't think it was really an option. Well, we didn't consider it anyway. Maybe somewhere in the back of John's mind, he had a plan B just in case, but we weren't ever considering that as an option.
Yeah, it wasn't your problem. You focused on getting this thing out the door.
Here's a question from the chat room from Matt Trevors in Pittsburgh. He says, since this application is so data-centric, did you use any special tools to optimize SQL? Either your SQL queries or tune the SQL Server, or was there any special tuning of the SQL Server? Or
No, the only thing I used was just Performance Monitor. I used that App Center test.
Yep.
And just I literally hammered away at that thing with, just simulating multiple clients hitting this thing, and then put some performance counters on, and watched it go.
So watched how the machine was surviving the load. And we haven't really talked about the SQL Server side of this. Was that already in place when you guys came in?
Yeah, part of it, yes.
So they were already running SQL Server. They had a data model in place, good or bad, and you just had to add in the additional features to let the presentation layer do what it's supposed to do.
Correct.
And I'm a data guy, and I look at these performance requirements and say, yeah, no problem. Like 100,000 rows over the course of a race, that's easy. Yeah, we can take that. It's far more challenging to present that information in a useful way.
Right, and to pull it back and have the half-second refresh. So
yeah, that time sensitivity to data is the one that's going to get you.
Right. Yeah, because they don't want this thing to be 3 seconds old, right? I mean, that's an eternity here.
Right.
Yeah, in a race, definitely.
And they're showing this data in real time to the crowd, right, on some sort of marquee?
They do. They do. It's different at each venue, but some of them have that.
Have a tie to this application to be able to feed that data directly?
Right.
Wow.
Challenging stuff. There's a lot of different pieces to this. And I guess there's the whole press angle as well, that this is what the press guys are counting on to know what's going on in the race and report it, whatever medium they're using.
Right.
Right, so they're sitting there with this app in front of them and then reporting off of that.
Does the IRL have much contact with the public with this sort of thing as well? Like, is there a website that's showing the state of the race in semi-real time?
They have a website, but it's this app, because this is a WinForm app, so it's not shown over the web.
Right.
I think they were going to work on another web application, but I don't know the status of that.
I'm interested in the company, Clarity Consulting, a little bit. I know that you and John Rauschenberger, the regional director, also is part of the company. But what sort of other things do you guys do, just in terms of normal projects for other clients? Or are there other sort of applications that you might want to talk about that you've built?
Yeah, we do a variety of applications. I mean, we're based here in Chicago, and we do applications for all kinds of industries. Retail. I've worked in retail, financial services, obviously the Indy Racing League, and
right.
As far as what we typically do, this was kind of a small scale application. We typically do more larger scale applications for our clients.
So, yeah, this is kind of an unusual project. I don't think you'd ever seen anything like that. How did you guys come to connect with the IRL? How did this all come to be in the timeline that was so tight?
I want to say we hooked up with them through the relationship that John has, John Rauschenberger, through Microsoft. So I think they contacted Microsoft, and were looking for some help that way.
And, of course, they're based out of Indianapolis, so that's not that far from Chicago. In fact, I've driven it.
Right. I used to go down on Monday mornings. It's like a 3-hour drive for me, so I go down on Monday mornings and then stay till Thursday night.
Have you noticed the guys in Indianapolis don't know what speed limits are?
No, they all think they're on the racetrack.
It's amazing. And I realize the reason they drive so fast in Indiana is there's nothing to hit. If you go off the road, you're in a cornfield. You pay the guy $20 to pull you out, and you're going again.
Sounds like fun.
Well, that was actually in Speedway, so that's a lovely part of town. But Indianapolis itself, the downtown area, is actually very nice. I was actually quite surprised. It's a pretty nice area.
It's a great drive.
Track is off in Speedway, just outside the city. So,
well, here's a question from Nolan, who's actually in Victoria, Richard.
Yeah, not far from me.
Yeah. He says, in fact, he's in your basement, man. What's going on? No. He's locked down in there.
I know who Nolan is. He's been at the Victoria user group. Shout out to Nolan there. Hi, guy.
Hey, man.
I'll see you guys next a couple of weeks.
From MCSL. He says, and this is a good question, how difficult was the learning curve for the VB6 guys? Were they able to, obviously they were able to adapt, but, were there any sort of grokking issues that they had getting VB.net? I mean, what did they think? about
Yeah,
VB?
that's actually a very good question. For this developer, it was a little bit of a learning curve for him, because he didn't. He was used to writing these Flash applications. As we came in and we had more of a component or N-tier based approach.
Yeah.
And that concept was kind of difficult for him.
Yeah.
Didn't understand. So we had, we created a base class for doing data access, right? So everything, then we inherit from that base class and build on top of that. Not that we had a lot of functionality in there, but in case they ever wanted to,
Yeah, you were putting a framework in place so that you could tolerate whatever they wanted to do.
Exactly. So I was trying to put this framework in place, and so it's component-based and it's N-tier, and I think he was just used to just going from the UI straight to the database, just make a call right from there, and so
yeah,
that type of structure and environment and framework was new to him. And it wasn't the object-oriented thing was kind of tough too.
I teach VB.NET to VB6 developers, and for the most part, the people who come to my class have read the requirements that you have to be an intermediate level VB6 developer to come to my class. Every once in a while, you get somebody who thinks they can hang, right out of Access or ASP, and every once in a while, I get that, and it almost seems like you have to sell them on why they're adding this extra layer of complexity, because in a class, in a very simple example, it's just contradictory to common sense, of what they're building at the moment. So I find that it takes, I say, look, just suspend your faith right now. Just go along with this, and all will be revealed in the end. And after a few different interfaces and a few different business rules and a few different ways in which you can leverage those components sort of take form, then the light bulb goes off. But it really is a weird place to just sort of be introduced to N-tier architecture as a VB6 developer, I think, because you really have to get sold on the fact that you need to do this, and it's not entirely obvious right away.
Well, and the benefit doesn't come from the initial coding. It comes from the maintenance. It comes from the later versions. That's
Absolutely.
where you really see the advantage of this sort of organization.
Yeah. I think that's going to be a challenge for Microsoft to get across in the next version of Visual Basic, which, is admittedly sort of going down to the VB programmers level a little bit in terms of some new high-level tools and interfaces and things that they can use to be more familiar. But ultimately, you're still going to have that architecture, why am I doing this architecturally kind of stuff that has to be taught somehow. And, that's the sort of the thing that I worry about all the time, because those are my customers.
Yeah, and he eventually came around and he got it, but it's just not intuitive. And if you're used to, hey, I'm here and I want to go there, I'm going to take a straight path, right?
Exactly.
And I'm telling him, no, you kind of want to take a left over here and then turn into the driveway, and it just was hard for him. But in the end, he was just singing the praises of .NET and what he could do, because you're talking about a guy who had to literally draw everything on a form using Flash that he wanted.
Yeah.
Wow.
And when he started seeing the power of drag and drop,
yeah,
he was like a kid in a candy store. He just
came to be a believer.
and just using VB, even earlier versions of VB, we kind of take that for granted.
Absolutely.
Drag and drop,
Sure.
control on a form. You want a button, boom, there it is.
Yeah.
He was just blown away by that.
Yeah.
He didn't have to write lines and lines of code to make that happen.
Yeah, describing an interface in code rather than describing it visually.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So he was loving it. He was actually digging it. So
That's great.
That is
cool
great.
To see that he was having fun with that.
So heed the story, VB programmers. Don't give up, man. Just keep grokking that stuff. Have faith, and don't worry. All will be revealed in the end, right? I feel like I'm on the Jedi Council here. Hey, speaking of fun things, I like to ask all my guests, what's the coolest thing you've downloaded lately? And I got to tell you, I'm not going to ask this question to Microsoft people anymore, because they always say, "Oh, MSN Search," So
it's all the Google tools and the
yeah.
Well, I downloaded the anti-spam the Microsoft beta version of their anti-spam.
Oh, I love it.
That was exciting. But, I think I heard a sign of your promo or somewhere, but, one of the things I just recently started using, and I wish I'd started using it sooner, was the Demon Tools.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. D-Tools.
That thing is just awesome, right? I mean, just mount these ISOs as drives on your PC.
I can't wait.
It's the way it should be.
Absolutely love that. So that's probably the last one who jumped on that, but I just started using that about a couple of weeks ago, and that's just been awesome.
I haven't started using it yet, but I plan to. There's lots of ways in which I can use that.
Oh, the stack of ISOs I have sitting in my big drive array, my 2 terabyte drive array is everything I want is there, and I just mount it as a drive, and off I go.
Oh, and it's so cool, and it's so seamless.
Yeah, it's just a drive letter.
Yep, that's it.
Have you heard about the perpendicular Hitachi technology that's going to the way they're reorganizing the way that bits on a hard drive are stored? They're currently stored magnetically end to end, so that they have to be a certain distance from each other. Otherwise, the magnetism will screw up the bits, and they'll start cascading and getting messed up. So what they're doing is, instead of laying them flat, they're making them perpendicular, and they take up 10 times less room this way, and it basically results in a 10-fold increase in storage. So a little 3 gig micro drive will now be, in a couple of years, 30 gigs.
Well, now what you're looking at is we're going to have terabyte hard drives.
Right. We're going to have terabyte hard drives in a couple of years.
And you need that for your iPod, right? So.
Absolutely. Absolutely, you do. And, it's not the iPod that's suffering, because the iPod has a little hard drive in it. 20 gigs, no problem. That's okay. But it's the Pocket PCs. The Pocket PCs really don't have a good storage mechanism.
Right.
I'd love to see a 30 gig micro drive in a Pocket PC. Then we can talk.
That's just a battery problem at that point.
Yeah, right.
That's the other thing that's going to happen. Is the other advantage of density is getting rid of platters. I mean, I can already buy a 500 gigabyte hard drive, but it's got 6 platters in it. I want 1 platter, so I don't consume as much power.
Yeah. Well, Matt, are there any last-minute words of wisdom or advice or anything that you want to tell the .NET community before we log off today?
I think we pretty much covered it, but hopefully if they got nothing else out of this, that the power of .NET, especially as demonstrated by this project that we were able to do in such a short amount of time, is just amazing and phenomenal. It truly was, the enabler that allowed us to deliver this application to the IRL on time and under budget. So, keep plugging away.
That's excellent. Well,
Great message.
Well, listen, Matt, on behalf of myself and Jeff in the sound room and Richard Campbell and all the people that we know and love, would like to thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Been a great hour here geeking out with you, and man, I love it. I love it all.
Down the road, turn left.
Watch the Indy 500 and you'll see the app up there. So.
All right.
Excellent.
Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Life is hard.